Welcome back to the Forecast, brought to you by Headstorm, the show that teaches you how to engineer growth by learning from industry luminaries to provide you with tactical steps you can use tomorrow. Hi, I'm Julian Placino, host of Headstorm Forecast. In today's forecast, Headstorm CEO Lawrence King is joined by John Humphrey. John is the founder and chief connector at Connect for Life and the author of Connect for Life. He is at the forefront of paradigm-shifting change aimed at some of today's thorniest issues. Today, he's sharing about his thoughts on the Great Resignation. He's also going to give us an inside look at how employee expectations have changed and how to adapt to those changes. John, it's an honor. Let's get started.
Welcome to the show, John.
Really great to be here. Excited about the topic and really excited that it's just a conversation between us about what's going on in the market and how can particularly technology-related firms benefit from listening. So
Yeah. So when we think about the Great Resignation, I've got a point of view on it. I'll tell you my point of view, but I'll get your point of view on it.
Okay.
People hear that term. What does it mean to you?
Well, for me, I've got to go back 20 years when I started coming out of Accenture, and my partner, Bruce Ballingy, and I, who was my co-founder at Pariveda, we were sort of thinking about how to re-engineer consulting. How do we create this great consulting firm that wasn't constrained by the things we had seen at some of the larger firms? And it was all about talent. And the more I researched, the more I realized that we have been in a talent shortage for at least 20 years. And so you've seen less diversity in technology. You've seen a lot of young women drop out of STEM programs in junior high and high school. Those are all the employees that you would have been hiring today.
Right.
And so I think, for me, the Great Resignation was this shock to the system and this resiliency that we had as an industry. For 30 days, everybody was afraid. And then we realized we could work remotely and all these tools that we've been investing in for 10 years, and then Zoom was on the scenes, that we could actually contribute to our clients' success from wherever we were in the world. And I think it opened up a whole new landscape. And my thesis is the power has shifted from the employer to the employee.
Right.
Employees are now empowered like they've never been before. And so that's manifesting itself, among other things, that we can get into in a lot of ways.
Yeah. That's interesting. You bring a broad perspective to it. Being in the industry now, my window on this is sort of in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years ago, 2019, people were excited. There wasn't a whole lot of transition or migration between companies. It certainly was competitive. The idea of the pandemic coming along and sending people home with the shelter in place, and then trying to figure out ways to work remotely and get it done because you're forced to do it, really opened up a lot of opportunities, actually. Opportunities to work from home, to take care of your kids, to get the work-life balance that a lot of people had wanted. And now we've got that competing pressure and companies trying to change, and then an accelerator, sort of gasoline added to the fire with inflation and high demand.
Yeah, all right, so the other interesting backdrop, and I don't want to get political, but back in the Great Recession, when our Federal Reserve started juicing the market, their goal stated was to increase asset prices. And so here you have these young people coming out of college, making substantially above average wages, working for very generous firms, really good matching on 401ks, and all of those things. They saved a ton of money. And when we juiced asset prices, they look at their 401k and their savings. They're all living below their means. They're
Right.
living on 60 and making 150, and they're not married yet, so they don't know what those expenses are going to be like. And they look at their bank account, they got $500,000-$600,000 in the bank at 30 years old. They're like, well, I don't need to work this hard anymore.
Yeah.
It's like all the money in the world to them. So I think not only did the technology show us we could work from anywhere, but I think there have been some mental health challenges, but I also think there's a level of financial independence that group of workers has that other groups of workers don't.
Right. What time frame do you think that is? Like, if you were to think of generationally, is it a generational thing or a moment in time in history?
Well, let's just talk about people under 28 or 30. They tend to think more broadly about work-life balance. They tend to value experience over things, like they really value
Right.
travel and friends, and they don't care what car they drive. They don't care if they got 5 people piled into an apartment when they're single. And so the things that we valued when we were kids, and now we're CEOs, we wonder, well, why don't they value it? It's because they have a different value system, I think.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I could, just today, I was talking with several folks, and we're kind of working through the Great Resignation in some ways ourselves. And when you start asking them why they're leaving, it's not necessarily a compensation issue. In some cases it is, and there might be a mismatch, but a lot of it is the experience. And maybe not the experience from an entertainment perspective or a personal perspective, but more from a growth perspective. I want to work for this firm because they have these causes. And in my sort of paradigm of how I think about my growth, that's something I want on my resume.
Or I want to go do something while I can.
Right.
I want to live in Colorado in the mountains. My daughter, she's an ER trauma nurse, graduated from TCU. She's like, I want to go to California and live. So she's in San Diego working for a great hospital system. She knows she won't ever really be able to do that for the rest of her life, but it's an experience that she wanted to have, and so she did it. And so I think what I really appreciate and what impresses me about this group of young workers is they don't hesitate. They just like, I got money in the bank, I quit. They're not leaving an experience or a company to something else to further their career,
Right.
like maybe we would have.
Right.
It's a very experiential thing, and in some cases, it's a mental health thing. They can't do it all, and they don't have the. I'll give you a great example. So I had a really talented woman that worked for me, and her husband went to medical school in Arizona. So she was working and part-time, and she realized, I have to have people in my life. And so as the pandemic has sort of lessened and she's been able to get, the social in, she now realizes she doesn't need to count on the job to have the social interaction. She can
Right.
go back to doing what she wants to do, which is marketing.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of those examples out there.
Yeah. Do you think that, part of me, and this is a hypothesis, being from the trenches, I'll have conversations with folks that may be leaving to go to their next journey, and they'll say, we'll have conversations, and they don't have any really good reasons. And I think this gets back to your point about it maybe a generational type of mindset switch. I'm looking for like monetary reasons. Were you unhappy? Was there monetary reasons? And what I've heard is, I just need to turn the page.
Yeah.
I need a change of scenery. And it makes me feel like perhaps with the pandemic of the last 2 years, part of the turning the page on the pandemic is perhaps moving or changing jobs.
Right. Yeah, a little bit of grass is greener. So let me take us back to the great debate in the tech space of talent versus skill, right? And maybe as a CEO you see hundreds of resumes a week, and your recruiting teams and your networking do the same. So when you think about a talented person versus a skilled person, what does that mean to you when you're thinking about people to hire?
So talent is their ability to absorb and grow. Skills is sort of their baseline, what they know now.
Right. That's exactly right. And so when I think about, and your business is all about talent.
All about people.
You want fungible skills. So if somebody needs to know .NET, one day and progressive web apps the next day, it's not a huge jump. Whereas in the olden days, it's like, well, I do SAP or I do Oracle. I can't possibly do integration. You need technicians who are creative and smart enough to solve really complex problems for your clients, right?
Right.
So those people need different things. They need a firm that makes an investment in them, in making them better across a wide range of things.
Right.
Not just skills, but also, problem solving and reasoning and servant leadership and community involvement and all of those kinds of things. So not a lot of firms that are thinking about their talent pool in that way.
Yeah. I think that, not to toot our own horn, but I think we do a pretty good job of that. At least having an awareness. So we have the expectations framework. This, when I founded the company, this was one of the first advisors, you know Rene Larave,
Yep.
and we were 10 people, and he said, hey, you need to build an expectations framework. And I said, what's that? Can you send it to me? He said, no, this is something that becomes part of your culture and you have to do yourself. And I thought, okay. And I didn't realize how difficult of a challenge it would be to really synthesize what you value in your people to be able to grow them and kind of tell them to share the journey of how to get to an executive.
Right. So we had something very similar at Party Beta. It's so funny you mentioned Renee. A lot of the genesis of some very successful firms in the DFW area came from that Tactica birth, as it were. And I can name 3 or 4 really successful consulting firms that came from there. The Credera guys, Aleda guys, and obviously Party Beta. But the expectations framework and for the audience simply is a way to define across a particular dimension, like relationships or sales or technical ability or servant leadership, or the things that you want a well-rounded partner to be in 15 years. You have to start when they're 21 or 22 years.
Right.
And at each level of their progression, that gets a little harder and a little more involved. And, what I'm curious about is, at Party Beta, people used to say all the time, well, I got my full-time job and I'm billing 50 hours a week. And then I got all this other stuff, mentoring and going to user groups to learn a new skill. And it's like having 2 jobs, and it burnt some people out. I'm wondering if that's maybe manifesting itself a little bit.
The Great Resignation has been making headlines this year, but it's interesting to think that this has been a shortage decades in the making. Good talent has been making great wages for the last 10 years or more. And those people are becoming financially independent now, which gives them the freedom to leave, even if they don't have another job offer in hand. There has also been a misalignment between what employers offer and what employees are looking for. And that is a generational thing. Now people value different things than what employers valued when they were in the same position. While it used to be all about compensation, now people are leaving for experiential reasons. Now, for our next segment on the forecast, we dive into how you should adapt as people's priorities change.
So pivoting over into kind of what are some areas, I know the McKinsey report just came, not a report, but a McKinsey article just came out. And they tend to have some decent insights in terms of kind of what's driving some of this. And one of the big numbers that came out that I found interesting was that about 40% of employees are interested in, not very likely, but thinking about leaving.
Yeah.
And if you were to think about, all right, I know that's happening, and I know that we've talked about some of the kind of underlying currents and trends. What are some of the ways that we might be able to start combating that and helping keep people, engaged?
Yeah. So, gosh, I have a lot of thoughts on that. So if I was a CEO out there of a company like yours, and in that role, it's the tyranny of the urgent. There's 1,000 things to do every day, and you can get to 10 of them. But the one thing that you've got to get to every day is inspiring your people to think about their careers and the value that they're creating, not only in the companies that they work with, but the byproducts of a good job and a good income to be able to plow that back into the local community. And they say where there's no vision, the people perish. So I think the number one thing a leader has to do is set the vision. You've got to be thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, I believe, and inspiring your people. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be charismatically inspiring your people.
Right.
And some of the greatest leaders that I've ever been around are just very matter of fact. They're largely introverted, and they say, this is where we're going, and I want you to go there with me.
Right.
And then I think we have to be flexible. People want, right now, what they want more than almost anything else, more than money, is flexibility. Flexibility to have time off, flexibility to work at home if they need to, flexibility to take care of their kids or their parents. I had 2 elderly parents that I had to take time to take care of. So if you can be, as opposed to some of the banking CEOs that came out after the Delta variant before Omicron and said, by God, we're all going back to the office,
right?
Because that's the only place that good things happen. Well, we found out good things happen when there's interaction between human beings wherever they are on the planet.
Right.
I will say, anecdotally, I was with a new client in Austin yesterday and spent 3 days with their executive team. And frankly, there's just no substitution for that.
Yeah.
The breaking of bread and the ideas you get over the coffee machine and hey, you said that 2 hours ago. Whereas the Zoom world is, 30 to 50-minute increments that go boom, 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 boom all day long. And then you get to the end of the Friday afternoon or whatever it is, and you go, now, what did I do today? What have I got to get done for tomorrow?
Replaying them all so you can take action items.
So vision number 1, flexibility number 2, and then I think you got to double down on the career path. You've got to grow people. You've got to invest money out of retained earnings to help them. And if there's not enough mentors and there's not enough time, maybe you make a little bit less money so they have, what normally billable time to invest in their careers. Because I think ultimately that's what's going to attract people long term. Is like, am I going to be better off here or someplace else? When the novelty of working in San Diego and going to the dog beach every day wears off, and you realize that the cost of living is 100% more, and your dollar doesn't go as far. Then I think it's about where can you build that culture, and I think that's probably what the pandemic has robbed from firms like yours, right? All of those get-togethers, all of those fun things that you guys do, the pictures that I've seen of all the games you've played, and where people really feel a sense of belonging.
Yeah. I can tell you that when the pandemic, when the pandemic first hit, but more importantly, when the shelter-in-place orders went into effect, and that lasted, people stayed at home for, months and months. And our initial reaction to that was, well, let's take everything that we were doing collectively in person and try to bring that online.
Yep.
And we were successful in doing it, which was a feat in and of itself. And all of our employees generally loved it for about 3 months.
Yeah.
And what the feedback we got was, which was super interesting at the time, is listen, we're on Zoom as part of our ordinary day-to-day 8 hours a day. And when we go and we do some of the game nights or the happy hours, the virtual happy hours, or all of the other activities we had, they felt like they were at work still.
Yeah.
And so we quickly pivoted to say, you know what, we have to rethink this, but we're going to leave those events as sort of optional, not push them too hard, but instead give people time back to decompress. Because I think there was a moment in time for folks that weren't experienced in working from home. Many of us I've worked from home. I know you've worked from home. There's a certain discipline that you sort of figure out and boundaries that you set in order to keep a work-life balance. I think a lot of these younger folks thrown into that were trying to do it all.
They just worked all the time.
And worked all the time and tried to do the happy hours, and they weren't getting the benefit out of it.
Yeah, I think, so like there's things that work when you go online. this discussion, we were doing physical events where I was hosting a panel, 2 or 3 panelists, and we were doing it in a physical location that was very nice. And we pivoted that online, and what I realized all of a sudden was magic, right? Because now I don't have to ride all my management team. How many people you got coming for 2 months? It doesn't matter if there's one person on the Zoom or none. The content is what's valuable.
Right.
So you have to sort of discern what works good in this medium and what doesn't. And clearly productivity went way up, 130, 140%, because people were working. I mean, I just remember that, hey, maybe you should schedule it for 50 minutes instead of 60 so that you can go down the hall.
Right.
or
I need to
don't
take a
have,
bathroom break.
Don't have 6 back-to-back 30-minute meetings that are all different topics, right? Because the switching costs emotionally is hard. Really hard. The context switching is really hard. So giving your people the benefit of the doubt on that. So, but I do think there's things that I really enjoy. It's given me more time with my family in the morning. So instead of just getting up at 6 a.m. and hitting the shower and off to the races, it's a walk, it's a cup of coffee, and at 15 minutes before my first meeting, I paddle across the pool deck and go to my office above the garage. And that's very liberating. But real hardcore creative stuff has got to be done with people. What you realized about the happy hour, what's the magic of the happy hour is the jokester starts going and everybody's kind of talking over each other.
Yeah.
And they're telling jokes and they're having fun and they're telling stories. That does not work.
No.
On a Zoom call, because you just like, I can't hear anybody, I'm out.
Yeah.
See ya.
Yeah.
So I think it's about what's the medium, what's the channel that is most effective. And I think even now, we know there are ways to practice social distancing, to wear a mask, to, do our hands, and never touch our face, to be in a ventilated room. I mean, I heard a really great virologist talk about the best way to be safe in this world, because it is real. It's genetic roulette.
Yeah.
You're either predisposed or you're not.
Right.
If you've been vaccinated, boosted, it doesn't mean you can't get the virus and can't become a host. But she said, wrap yourself in layers of Swiss cheese, which I thought was great. She goes, any one of these things by itself won't work. But if you get the vaccine and you wear the mask and you don't touch your face, we watched the podcast like when it first happened. This was like March of, what was that, 19 or 20? It's like a time warp, 20. And this guy said, most important thing is not touch your face. And so, for me, I'm a fidgety guy, so it's like, I got to sit on my hands, don't touch your face. But you got to find out what works. And I think you just continue to be creative. You continue to engage your people in the process of figuring out how to take care of your clients.
Yeah.
And after all, they pay us to solve problems and deliver value so that their businesses thrive.
Right.
And that's the core of what we do. And it takes a certain servant mindset. You got to really enjoy helping people, and not only just inside the culture of the company, but in the community and at the company. So.
Right.
40% of employees are considering leaving their jobs. These are uncharted waters. So, what can you do to keep your great talent? Work on keeping your people actively involved in your company's culture. Share your vision for the future often. Offer flexible options. Lay out a clear roadmap your employees can use to advance their careers. Whenever Lawrence started Headstorm, he was determined to provide a place for those involved in creating solutions with software to do their best work and to be properly rewarded, both through professional development and equity participation. Part of that was laying out a clear roadmap so that everyone at Headstorm knows exactly what they need to do to move to the next stage in their career. Next up on the forecast, we'll tell you about our experience adjusting both management and culture.
Now, if I was to put on the hat of CEO of any company, and a lot of them in the forums that I'm a part of, a lot of them have trepidation with this work from home culture. And they think, well, how do I know they're working?
Yeah.
How do I How do I know that that they're not? How do I measure
Yeah.
output now? It
Right.
used to be I could look at somebody's butt in a seat and at least have some basic metric for, yes, they were in attendance and therefore I got output.
You imagine to yourself that they were being productive because you could see them.
Yeah,
You didn't know they were playing a game or on their phone, but I think it's very simple. We needed our employees to be productive during the pandemic so that we all kept our jobs. And they did it. And what I think happened is it lowered the swamp on a whole lot of marginal managers, because marginal managers don't know how to give people a task, measure the progress, give people feedback. But our industry, especially now that we've gone to like an Agile development methodology where we're doing 2-week sprints on a development project, and we're doing a daily stand-up, and we're doing a inch pebble analysis at the end of the week to say, what did we get done?
right.
Like, it's really obvious if somebody's working on something and, checking in code,
Right.
whether they did something. If you know how to manage that,
Right.
And that's not under my thumb. That's, sometimes people work really great late at night. Sometimes, like this week, I was really, really busy. Tomorrow's going to be a work day, and so I think you have to get down to expectations, follow up. I work with one of my clients today. He wants by noon every Friday, he wants to know what I got done this week, what I'm going to try to accomplish next week, and what blockers that I have sitting in front of me that he can help knock out of the way. And I think that's a really elegant, easy thing. I mean, the
Right.
hardest thing for a busy person is to remember to do it before noon on Friday.
Right.
But I think that's a really good way to work with people. When I do my one-on-one coaching, it's always, what are your top 5 prospects? Who are you thinking about every day? So when somebody says, how can I help you, Lawrence? You say, oh, well, I need to get into ABC company. And it's how many points did you get in networking, marketing, which is sort of the social media, the publishing stuff, and then selling, like is how many meetings did you have? And how many, what was your total points and how many meetings did it result? So I
Right.
can always tell when I'm coaching people who's just shooting me the breeze and who's getting the work done.
Right.
Because you sort of start hearing the same stories week after week versus the guys that have a lot of activity and they're having meaningful meetings in the marketplace. And so I think it's a leadership challenge, but there's lots of tools out there. There's Jira, which is a really good tool. And so I think the burden is on the leaders.
Yeah.
It's on that mid-level manager to say, do I know what my team is doing?
Right.
And usually when a software development project goes south, it's because that mid-level manager, that project leader, really doesn't know what his people are doing every day.
Right.
And they should.
It's definitely the work from home, paradigm has enforced the processes, these good best of breed processes to transpire. Before, when you were in person, you didn't have to really participate in much of the rigor because you could always walk down a couple seats, ask somebody's status,
Right.
get their updates, all of that good stuff. But now that's one of the good things about the work from home is it really enforces the idea of there's a very structured process in order to maintain accountability. Companies just have to use it.
Yeah, and it's sometimes it can be a little burdensome. Like I'm actually a subject matter expert on a project that one of your guys is leading, and we have a stand up at 9:00 every morning for 15 minutes. And sometimes I make it, and sometimes I don't. But that's our time to get together and say, okay, what do I owe you? What do you need from me? What am I going to try to commit to getting to you in the next 2 or 3 days? And it's just this basic stuff, because it's a really good segue into sort of the last topic, which is what sticks. If we're right that talent switching costs is easy, but we don't have enough, and wages are clearly inflated. We have wage inflation, and people are going across the street for $1, but they're also going across the street for other things. what do you think sticks 6 to 12 months from now? And what do you think might actually be a permanent fixture for our industry?
So I'll take a step a little bit higher level when I answer this. I think that companies need to be nimble and agile. And I hate using the term agile too much.
Yeah.
I think that you have to have, just like companies, they treat their customers, there's this product mindset now where you're going out and you're asking your customer, what do you want? What do you think about this? How do you think about the pricing? And you're building the product for the customer.
Right.
I think that companies need to have those same structures and mechanisms focused internally on their employees so you can pivot quickly. So it's really about involving the employees in the conversation through surveys and the mentor-mentee meetings and every opportunity you can to get their feedback, because then you'll find out what sticks. Because right now things are so dynamic that I don't think you can go necessarily all in one area or another.
Right.
When we did a survey coming out of COVID, we found that half and half, some folks that were working from home, they wanted to come back into the office.
Yeah.
So we thought, well, maybe 80 to 90%, maybe 100%, everybody wants to stay home. That wasn't the case. It was
Not at all.
50-50.
People got lonely.
People got lonely and they needed that human interaction.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, if you were to address it from a durability and a long-standing strategy, I feel like it's put the mechanisms in place to get the feedback from your people and let them drive that. And then you can always counterbalance that with financials and figure out ways to make it work.
No, I think that's really right. You got to have the infrastructure to allow them to work from anywhere.
Right.
And, what you're going to do is you're going to pick up hours at the margin, because they were busy on Wednesday afternoon with a kid play, and so they're going to get up on Saturday morning and they're going to participate in a scrum, or they're going to write a requirement, or they're going to do a deliverable or something like
Right.
that. So one of the things I've noticed about your firm is in this sort of quest for talent, you sort of thought about it in much broader terms. So you thought outside of your core markets of Pittsburgh and Dallas-Fort Worth. So talk a little bit about that, because I think that's the same thing. You started viewing talent as this thing to find and search for.
Right. Well, and this is the driver behind that was the work from home movement, but also the inflation movement. In big cities, your top 10 metropolitan areas, the wage inflation really increased substantially in those areas.
Yeah.
Where some pockets of what we're calling secondary cities,
Right.
it didn't inflate that much, or it in some.
And probably the characteristics of some of those places were places that people wanted to live.
Right.
They weren't the
Absolutely.
big rat race. They were the Nashvilles.
That's right.
Charlotte, North Carolinas.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I
so
think that's right.
The idea of working remote, here's the thing that I'm learning, and this is a learning lesson for everybody. I don't think anyone has got, 100% crystal
blueprint.
ball. But I think that the learning lesson here for me is that you can't sit with 2 feet in either boat. You have to choose. Even if you end up with a flexible hybrid model, you still need to accommodate the folks that are remote because they're talent and you need to retain them. And you don't want to create this second-class system
Right.
where those folks that come into the office somehow have opportunity that the remote folks don't.
Right.
So you're forced to go in and make a decision.
I think that's right.
So our strategy really is, what? Now that we've kind of had that epiphany, now it's like, what tools do we need to have in place? What structures and processes do we need to have in place, knowing that we're going to adapt them? And how are those structures and processes informed by the larger employee base?
Yeah, I think that the moral of that story is to do it right and to be flexible. It's harder for your management team.
Absolutely.
And it's harder for you.
Absolutely.
It's simple when you walk in the door and all your peeps are here.
Yeah.
Okay, Christmas, all your peeps are home for Christmas. So applaud you for that.
When the pandemic first hit, so much changed. Companies suddenly had to shift a remote model, and that required a lot of adjustment. It's changing how people manage, how they measure completed tasks, outputs, and outcomes. That burden often falls on the mid-level management. Now, if a project goes south, it's usually because they're not staying involved with the project. Working from home really put an emphasis on the process, Mid-level managers had to standardize the way they were going to check in on projects. Amidst all that change, you can't sit and do nothing. You have to figure out how to adapt. The Forecast next segment will give you the inside scoop on how to help your employees grow.
We'll cover the power of mentorship, especially from the view of a mentee towards mentors. So what is a mentor? The simple definition is they're a trusted person that gives a less experienced person guidance on behaviors that'll help them model their behaviors to grow as a professional or person. I do have a kind of a question for the group here in terms of, I saw Sam's comment on the BCG energy. Thanks, I'll take that as a compliment. But has everybody here had a mentor before? I'm guessing most have, but has anybody not? Don't be embarrassed.
My mentor's been neglecting for the last 2 months.
I'm Miggy's mentor. I just got assigned, so I haven't been neglecting him for that long, for a week, I guess. But yeah, I can definitely think back to kind of my first mentorship professionally. I actually got insulted by my mentor to start off with. I remember she walked by my desk at my first corporate job. I was wearing like a baggier dress shirt that I got from like Costco or something. And she's like, hey, there's like Nordstrom Rack and other places you can get fitted shirts, right? I was like, dang, she's real. So we started just setting up informal time for us to catch up every month. And before you knew it, like we became connected like at a personal and professional level and started, that's when I started showing my biceps too. I found out I could get small sized polos that made me look larger than I am. But no, it was a pretty like informal kickoff, but hopefully for you guys, this allowed you to kind of find a way to find mentors without having that experience traumatically at the beginning of getting your style shut down. So why is mentorship important? You'll see the stat at the bottom. So there was a really interesting Sun Microsystems study over like 10 to 15 years about mentorship and its impact on employees from management all the way down to entry level. And after that 15-year study, they found that mentors and mentees were both 20% more likely to get a raise than people that didn't participate in the mentoring programs. And that included the Sun Microsystems mentoring program and outside programs. And then also the employees who did receive mentoring were way more likely to be promoted. Now, I did think about this. This may be more correlation than causation, right? Like if you're going to go seek mentoring, you might be more of an A player than someone that doesn't. But I'm sure that the impact is still there as well. Jules, feel free to look at the end value on that study afterwards. I know you're thinking about that already. But with a good mentor, you're going to get a lot of things, right? The number one thing is you're going to get that feedback that you wouldn't get from a lot of processes in your normal life. Like you're going to be by yourself working. You're going to be with coworkers who are focused on work, getting things done. And they're not necessarily thinking about your career or your path through your personal kind of ambitions. The second thing is looking at the accountability, right? You're likely not going to hold yourself accountable as well as someone else that you have to report to. And I remember Lawrence having to go into these weekly meetings with Renee, who's one of our senior advisors, and literally just giving him a report on status across the company, across his like personal goals and everything else. And it was funny kind of watching Lawrence get grilled through the glass window, but I'm sure that being held accountable every single week lets you kind of make progress against your plans as a professional, right? And the last thing is the mentor will be an important keystone of your network. That since you're basically revealing everything about yourself professionally and personally to this person, there's a connection and bond that you won't get normally through a lot of other relationships. And that person, if there's someone that you is in your professional network and is someone that's more senior, is likely going to be a source for like job referrals, business development, other things in your life that are going to be very important for you to grow with. So what is a mentor? In simple Venn diagram, it's a mix. They're a mix of someone that you admire and respect, someone that can serve with time and capacity, and someone that can guide you towards your goal with a specific skill set and set of expertise. I always joke about the left side with someone you admire, like what does that even mean? And for me, it's like someone you know is better than you that you don't hate. But But it's important to kind of find the balance. Obviously, with your network and the people around you, you're not going to be able to find the perfect combination of all at the same time, right? But at least try to look for someone that has a little bit of each that can help guide you. Likely, it'll be someone in your network already that will be willing to serve as your mentor. It's very unlikely that a stranger would just say, hey, I'm going to commit a lot of time to you. I found that most of the time that my mentors have happened to be my bosses and managers. They have like a direct kind of link to your performance, right? So for them, it's almost like obvious that they should be helping you at a professional capacity.
Thanks as always for tuning in to the forecast brought to you by Headstorm with your host, myself, Julian Placino, and Lawrence King. As part of this vast community, we hope these tips and insights will make a difference, future-proof your business, your mindset, and help you surpass your expectations. Feel free to reach out. Our contact info is in the description. Hope to see you next time as the forecast brings you more thoughts from industry leaders and strategies to engineer growth.